Okay, so welcome to this video, which is hopefully a companion to this book that you can see, that the Irish invented chess. And on the front cover of that book, I put a picture of a Berber lady that was taken approximately in 1900. Now, the reason for putting that in is it's very interesting to look at the two sort of brooches that are used to hang up her dress. What sometimes happens when people try to trace the history of peoples is that they take, for example, brooches, and they see the particular design, and that would link back different tribes, etc. But that design of brooch is exactly the same as the Tara brooch, and this is in North Africa about 1900. So I just thought I'd highlight that to show that there's sometimes these sort of strange links between Ireland and the East that people can underestimate, and maybe somehow or other chess comes into that. And anyway, as you can see in this reference here, for those who don't know, the Irish did actually always claim to have invented chess, because the Irish, through the Tuatha De Danann. The Tuatha De Danann are one of the tribes that invade Ireland, and they're very much associated with if you want to put it like that, the spiritual sites around Ireland, like megalithic tombs. They often talk about the Tuatha De Danann in that context. As you can see here, Lugh, he is the first who brought chess play and ball play and horse racing and assembly into Ireland. So he'd be one of the kings of the Tuatha De Danann. So that's how we know that the Irish claimed to have invented chess. That's from Libor Gabala Éireann, meaning the Book of Invasions in Ireland, one of the great texts of Irish history. So, I mean, Lugh is a very sort of semi-mythological figure, so it's very hard to know how much direct historical evidence you could take from that reference, but it's interesting anyway. But another interesting reference, I'm just sort of throwing out here where this comes from. Why do people say that the Irish invented chess? Well, you know, what's the origin of all this talk anyway? And I'd just like to describe, for example, that in 1922, with Irish independence, the authorities revived what has often been described as the Olympics of Ireland. It's the old Tailteann Games. In the great old stories of Ireland, and again linked back to the geography of Ireland, you have the Tailteann Games, which is, as I say, the basic way to look at it is the Olympics of Ireland. And they wanted to revive it in about 1922 when they got independence, and they did revive it about 3 or 4 times in the 20s and early 1930s. And but it's interesting that when they decided, as you can see from this little newspaper record of the time, when they decided to revive it, they thought long and hard about it, and they decided to put in chess as one of the ancient games of Ireland, and therefore they're going to put it into the Tailteann Games. And it was a very deliberate decision, as you can see there. Their understanding was that that chess was an ancient Irish game. So they thought that, anyway, in this newspaper article in the 1920s. It's from the Westminster Examiner. And here is another newspaper. This newspaper flourished in the 1880s, and one of the editors was Michael Cusack, as you can see there. Michael Cusack, of course, is the great name in the revival of Gaelic games, in the ancient Irish games, the GAA and all the rest of it. You can look up Michael Cusack. He's there everywhere. He's a really, really big figure. But anyway, he brought out this newspaper in the 1880s, and in it they had a prominent chess section. And he says at one point that the reason why they were putting chess into it is because it's another ancient Irish game, just like hurling and all the rest of it. So there was traditionally, if you like, nationalist circles in Ireland in the late 19th century, early 20th century, this concept that chess was an ancient Irish game. And the basic reason why it's put in there is because there are numerous references in the great bardic stories of Ireland, in the great bardic poems of Ireland. I mean, there are hundreds of references to the Irish playing board games, and in particular, they played the game fidchell. Now, fidchell in the Old Irish, you could spell it maybe Fidchell, and the modern Irish word for chess is Ficheall. So it's fidchell and fill, it's just the same word. So in other words, the ancient Irish stories, going back as early as you can possibly go, which is a big distance in Irish history. You know, you could talk about nearly biblical times. They're playing fidchell, and fidchell, the translation of fidchell in modern Irish anyway, is chess. So is that then chess? Well, their understanding in the late 19th century, early 20th century was that it was indeed, and that the Irish therefore are that chess is an ancient game to Ireland. I mean, you don't hear that in modern times, but they did, in fact, think this in Irish nationalist circles at that particular time. Now, the question that this book asks is, well, is that true? Is this chess, and did the Irish invent it, or what's the story? So that's the story of this book, which hopefully I'll be able to enunciate as we go on. Thank you very much. So the first thing that I want to do in this video is digress from describing the Irish references to chess to describe a little bit of the international candidates for the origin of chess. I just want to point out to you that actually numerous countries all across the world claim to have been the source of the origin of chess. You'll see Egypt. There is a very, very interesting diagram from one of the I suppose it's one of the pyramids or whatever. And then you have the Greeks seemingly playing a board game on one of the vases. You'll see a little video here from Albania from about 500 AD, that they reckon that this piece that was found in Albania is dated to about 500 AD, which is a very old reference in Europe, and it's very hard to understand how that ties into our understanding of chess. The Chinese claim to invent nearly everything, so needless to say, they claim to invent chess. You can see there two figures there playing a game. So there is a Chinese chess. I'm not sure the Chinese chess references are actually all that old or all that successfully linked to the modern day game of chess. You'll see references to chess in Korea, which you'll see there. There's quite important references from Japan. There's a Japanese type of chess, which might be closer in comparison to the modern day international game of chess, but not all that old, the references to Japanese chess. There's a chessboard from Burma, and I think it's from Burma and also Malaysia. You get another series of proposals put forward that they're the origin of chess. But generally speaking, internationally, the most important references come from northern India, which you can see here. The claim is that the board game known as Chaturanga might be the origin of chess, and that some poems referencing kings that interacted between northern India and Persia around about 700 or 800 AD, that they are the earliest, most important references to chess, and therefore people claim that northern India would be the origin of chess approximately at that date, 700 AD, very roughly. But in fact, it is by no means a settled history. It is not remotely the case that people can tell you definitively that it came from India at that particular date. And that's why I'm just throwing these international references here and ending the point by saying that nothing in that invalidates the references from Ireland. And the references from Ireland could end up to be much older than any of these other ones, at least much older and explicitly, hopefully explicitly chess. Obviously the Egyptian, the Greek references are very old. But so it's not a settled history. That's the point I'm trying to make here. And no, in the book, I do not go into great detail about the other candidates, if you like, for the origin of chess. I'm just trying to hammer down the Irish one because I have hopefully the linguistic knowledge and the historical knowledge to do a proper work on that. And if I jump into describing India, I'd have to know Hindi and Farsi and all the rest of it. And I don't feel competent to talk about that. But in my researches on the subject, by no means the case that we have definitive historical references from India that prove definitively it came from that area at that time. So when people disparage the Irish references to chess, the assumption is that it's all written up and it's definitely from India. I believe that not to be the case, that you should therefore take the Irish references seriously. So that's all I wish to say in that section. Well, this section here is another sort of annex to the central question of whether the Irish invented chess, because I'm describing here what are different games played in Ireland and played internationally, but are frequently confused with the Irish references to chess. Now, what you're looking at here are references to, or pictures of Ballinderry. It's a place in Westmeath, and where they found a crannog. A crannog is a kind of an artificial island in a lake or in a boggy area at any rate, which the Irish created in order for fortress purposes. So they would build the artificial island and they would put all their valuables there, and it wouldn't be easy to attack because it's in the middle of a lake. And anyway, they found this crannog here in Ballinderry, and on the crannog they found this gaming board that you see pictured. And you can see an illustration of the gaming board there, and you can see how there seems to be four different areas marked off at the four corners, and a central area marked off, and that then tallies with some international, or at least Scandinavian and British archaeological finds. So you'll see there a board from Orkney, and you'll see another reference there of the Vikings. And now this game then, so the Ballinderry board seems to be linked to this. They often refer to it as a Scandinavian game or a Viking game, and they usually call that Tafel, Tafl. But I wish to point out to you in this book of chess in Iceland, they clarified that Tafel, that's the Tafl of this archaeological reference, is actually pronounced Tabl, Tabl. Now you might think that's not a big deal, except actually it is. It's a really big deal, because if you can pronounce Tafel as Tabl, what you're doing is you're putting all of these games into a certain pronunciation bracket. So you have the game frequently described in English as tables, which would be, as time went on, would seem to correspond to backgammon. And then you have the Welsh game Talbert. Again, you see the same sort of word. And of course, the English game tables, and I believe all these other words, will be linked to the Latin tableau, tables. So you have Talbert, the Welsh game. By the way, for those who don't know, there are a lot of board games described in the Welsh text. They're very similar to the Irish text, and people will describe the Welsh games and the way they compare to the Irish games. I haven't gone into too much detail of that in this video because it's another day's work. But anyway, you have the Talbert as one of the Welsh games, which actually was described in some detail in, I think, the 16th century. So you've got Talbert, you've got Tabl, T-A-B, pronounced Tabl, which is the Scandinavian game spelt Tafel, T-A-F-L. And then you have the Irish Toplish. Toplish is T-A-I-P-L-I for the S approximately, which is the modern Irish word for draughts. But in fact, it seems that that's part of the same etymological root, because toplish, tables, tableau, talbert, tabel meaning tuffle, is obviously the same sort of area. So you have a kind of a stream of board games that come under that general heading of tabel, toplish, etc., etc., and they seem to be played. Now, there is a proposal that people say how you play tabel. It comes from a Latin text from, I think it's Sweden. It described a game played among the Laplanders of Sweden. But I think a simpler way to understand this table, is it might be similar to a game of backgammon, but played with four players. So it seems like maybe you're going around the board from your sort of, like Ludo, from your sort of base back to your other base, playing it kind of like backgammon. I'm playing it particularly with the dice. And so anyway, we come here to what is certainly the most important reference to what seems to be this general game. And it's from a manuscript, which is now in England, but it's clearly an Irish manuscript. It's called, so the game on the manuscript is called Alia Evangelii. And you can see it there from the original manuscript. And then you can see there a CAD drawing of the original manuscript with all of the text around it, some in Irish, some in Latin, translated. So that's a CAD drawing I drew of Alia Evangelii. And in the text, the very long text that accompanies that diagram, you can make some guesses as to how it's played, but actually it's still ambiguous. It's not absolutely clear how it's played, but it seems to have some some relationship to these games, the table type games, because again, you look at the center seems to be marked off, and the four corners seem to be marked off in the same way that you get in the Ballandary board and in the Orkney and the other references. So that seems to be, again, Alia Evangeli is part of the same stream. And unfortunately, even though we have a huge long text, it's a very long text. There's a well-known paragraph that attaches to this game, but that's not the full text at all. There's another 2 or 3 pages of Latin. I translated the whole thing for this book, in case anybody wants to read it. And unfortunately, I can't say definitively how it's played, but I still think it might be, as I say, a kind of a four-angled game of backgammon. That 4 people are playing backgammon and they're hitting each other. Like in backgammon, if you have one piece on its own, you can get hit, and if you have 2 pieces, it sort of protects the piece. I think something like that is coming across in the game Alia Evangeli, but still very ambiguous. Anyway, so this particular section, as I say, it's a kind of an appendix to the main text, because what I'm actually saying here is that all of those games have really nothing to do with the Irish references to chess, and they're frequently confused with it. We hear all of the time that fidchell is somehow the game Tafel, the game, the Viking, blah, 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 the Ballandary board describes it. It doesn't, okay? This is a separate stream, and the stream seems to be basically backgammon. And backgammon, by the way, does seem to come into the English game out of Ireland, bizarrely enough. I say that because you can read a 17th century text in which they describe backgammon, clearly the modern game of backgammon, and the word they use to describe it is Irish. Irish is the name of the game, and it's clearly modern day backgammon. So there's something going on there in terms of this game as well, involving the Irish, but I don't exactly know what it is. And what it isn't is chess. So you can, park all that talk about Tafel, etc. It's nothing to do with the Irish references to chess. So I just wanted to make that clear, and we'll go on to the next section now. Thank you much. Okay, so the first rather obvious point when we address the main issue here, whether the Irish invented chess, is to ask ourselves, well, what words are we referring to? What are the ancient words that I'm saying might refer to the international game of chess as used in the Old Irish texts? Well, we've already come across one of them as by far the most well-known word, fidchell. So the modern Irish word for chess is fidchell, F-I-C-H-E-A-L-L. The ancient word for chess, as used in the old stories, etc., would be F-I-D-C-H-E-L-L. But remember, the word tends to get spelled a whole lot of different ways, and even according to the case of the word, etc. So it actually isn't a very clear spelling. But nonetheless, anyway, it's clearly the same word as the modern Irish word fidchell. And I notice here that in the internationally accepted words for chess, you'll see phil, P-H-I-L. So that sounds an awful lot similar to fidchell. So so presumably we can link fidchell back to the internationally accepted words for chess. Anyway, fidchell is an extremely well-known word used in this context. And most people, when they talk about the Irish references to chess and the controversy, etc., they are generally referring to fidchell as the word to use. But it is by no means the only word of interest in the Irish texts that seem to link back to the international game of chess. Then, as well as that, you have the word brannamh, B-R-A-N-N-A-M-H. Now, the etymology of that word is pretty clear. It comes from a word bran, or sometimes actually the full word brandamh is described as a king or a nobleman. So bran is a king or a nobleman. So if you're playing brannamh, you're playing a game, if you like, of kings. That's the etymology of the word. It's reasonably clear. Now, what you're looking at here is a video of Tubride churchyard in County Tipperary. What I'm doing this video is I'm just using any old excuse to put in some nice videos and pictures of some of the great historic sites of Ireland, since I thought maybe people viewing this video might like to see them. So anyway, this is Tubride churchyard. Tubride churchyard is very associated with a guy called Dr. Geoffrey Keating. Dr. Keating was educated in the bardic schools of Ireland, and then he went to the continent and he came back to Ireland as a secular priest. But he's very well known for writing some of the most important texts on Irish history, in particular his first Fasa Éireann, kind of a foundation of knowledge on Ireland, meaning in Irish history, which is often considered the earliest modern Irish text. In other words, the Irish of it is quite readable even by modern Irish speakers, and yet it goes back quite a distance because he actually was educated in the bardic schools. Anyway, one of his texts has explicitly describes a modern day chess set, and he uses the word brannamh. So I just want to describe that in case people are wondering, why am I saying brannamh could be chess? Well, there you have it in black and white. Dr. Geoffrey Keating is describing a modern day chess set in one of his books, and he's using the word brannamh for it. So, okay, so that links brannamh back to modern day chess. And another character which we'll come to describe particularly at the end of this video is Thomas Hyde. Thomas Hyde wrote the first large modern style history of chess. It's in Latin. He wrote it while he was in Oxford in England. He was one of the great translators. He's also associated with the Bodleian Library in Oxford and a great linguist, etc., etc. And he wrote, actually I think it's about 3 or 4 separate texts on the history of chess in Latin in the late 17th century. And he actually uses a lot of the different Irish words for chess, but the one that he explicitly uses for the international game of chess from Ireland is brannamh. He puts fidchell in a somewhat different stream, which is kind of confusing, but anyway, it's brannamh that he describes as being the Irish word for the international game of chess. So there's 2 17th century authors telling you that brannamh is the Irish word for chess. So you have fidchell. I mean, fidchell, it goes back a big distance. I don't think anybody would dispute, but that fidchell is a word that you have to take seriously, is the Irish word for chess. You have brannamh from Dr. Geoffrey Keating, who's associated with the Turbride Church that you just saw there. And now we come to another word called beartrach. As another word for chess in the old Irish tales. Now, beartrach has another quite specific etymology. Bart, it appears, is the name of a move in this game. It's the name of a move in chess as played by the ancient Irish, Bart. And it seems to involve 2 people going around one person. Now, I haven't described in any more detail the description of this move in this video because I've got a whole chapter on it in the book. So I'll just refer you back to the chapter. It's a very important text. But anyway, that's the etymology. Beartrach is Bart, B-A-R-T, is the name of a move within the game, and then you can call the game itself beartrach. So it's a bit like you have the game Snap, obviously the card game Snap, and Snap is kind of a move within the game. I know it's not a very complicated game, but anyway, so you just go Snap, and then they just call the overall game after this particular move within the game. So that's the idea behind beartrach. And beartrach, again, it's a very old reference to chess. You can see it here in the Yellow Book of Lecan. It's just a reference there in the manuscript, but also you can see there in some of these pictures O'Clerig. Micheál O'Clerig is obviously the compiler of the Annals of the Four Masters, one of the absolutely top great scholars of Ireland, and he actually wrote a book, and in it it's a kind of a dictionary or a glossary, and in it he explicitly says that beartrach is the game of chess. So you have fidchell, brannamh, beartrach. These are 3 of the great words that you're going back to the old stories and you're associating that with the game of chess, if we agree it is chess. Now, we also come to another word which is very rare. It's not really an important word to think about, but I'm just throwing it in because it's there. The name is langmheur. I don't actually know how to pronounce it. I mean, I've never seen anybody pronounce it. But anyways, it's spelled something like Langmheur. And in this text that you can see, it's dated from 1747 by a guy called Hugh O'Daly, and it explicitly is saying that that's chess, that langmheur is a reference to chess. There is also a 17th century poem which throws in langmheur, and again apparently as meaning chess. So you have that word meaning chess. I don't claim to know virtually anything about the etymology of it, unless it's linked to lions. It's just a guess. or the history of langmheur. Don't look at me, it's a very rare word used in chess, but it is actually used in chess, as you can see from Hugh O'Daly's reference. So I don't know anything further about it. But that gives you, anyway, the 4 words that you're looking through the ancient Irish text and seeing is that a reference to chess: fidchell, brannamh, beartrach, and langmheur. So we'll come on to the next section now. So in these sections, the hope is that I can describe here some of the old manuscripts and stories and poems of Ireland, and also maybe the sites that they're associated with, and see what it tells us about chess. So in this part here, I'm going to talk about St. Columkill. And the site that St. Columkill, possibly anyways, most associated in Ireland would be Kells, because that was the kind of the headquarters of St. Columkill's order in Ireland, as opposed to internationally, because that would be Iona. But the Iona monks eventually came here to Kells, so I thought you might like to see that. And what you also saw there a second ago was St. Columkill's house. It's a very old house. It's possibly where the relics of his bones were kept, and also the Book of Kells. Anyway, the reason why we're looking at Kells here and look at the magnificent ecclesiastical site is because it is stated that on the death of St. Columkill, that might be about 597 AD, there was a poem written on his death. It's called an elegy, if you want to put it like that. On his death, it's called Amra Columkill. Now, that became one of the favourite poems in the great bardic schools of Ireland. And and they used it over the centuries. They would repeat the Amra Columkill. And they even repeated it during periods where the language used in the poem would be archaic, would be too old, if you like, for the people who were speaking Irish, even about the 800 AD mark. So what they had to do is they had to include a glossary with the poem. That is an explanation for some of the complicated words used in the poem. So one of the words that they focusing on is nia, which means champion. But the thing was, it was obsolete at the time that they were reciting the poem. So what they did was they brought in another old poem, contemporary-ish with the original elegy, with the original Amra, and they used that to illustrate the meaning of the word nia. Meaning champion. So we have an old poem which is difficult to date, but would be seemingly approximately the same date as the original Amra, and which is difficult to date. We'd say 6th century, 7th century, something like that, AD. Now this poem that then is included in this glossary is very interesting because it very clearly states that that the game of fill is played with equal pieces on both sides, and to distinguish them you use a different type of colour for one side to the other. In other words, the same as chess. Now this rules out a lot of different board games, and so you can see it there, the description of the poem, and it's a very interesting and important reference. So now we come to another of the great stories of Ireland. Well, it's the first of the great stories. Tuireachtaí Diarmuid agus Gráinne. As you can see here, it was used in the Leaving Cert syllabus traditionally in Ireland. And as you can also see, in the game they play Bert Fill, meaning they play a game of Fill. Now, in this part of this story, you have Diarmuid and Gráinne, and both of them are in a tree. And what's happening is that the Fianna are trying to chase them down. They've kind of eloped, and the Fianna, which Diarmuid was traditionally a part of, were chasing them down, and they were surrounding the tree, and the tree in which Diarmuid and Gráinne are on top of. And they proceed to have a game of fill. So the word that's used in this one is beartrach, but as I described in the previous sections, that's another word used for this game, this ancient Irish game, which I believe to be chess. So it's beartrach that's used. But anyway, in it, what's happening is that there's a move in which one of the players, if they move that piece at that particular time, can win the game. Otherwise, they're going to lose. And so Diarmuid and Gráinne discuss this way up in the tree, and it's agreed that Diarmuid throws down a small little berry on top of the piece to be moved, and that gives the clue to the player to move that and win the game. And this happens a number of times. They're playing against Fionn McCool, because you see Diarmuid still has old loyalties back to his old comrades in the Fianna. Now, so the significance of this is you have to sit back and pause and think about this for a minute. It means then that in this game, this ancient game played in Ireland, if I can indicate the piece to be moved, I can move that and win the game, or at least do well in the game. Now, if you pause again just to think about that for a minute, that rules out a lot of other games. If you take dice games, for example, backgammon, obviously that, generally speaking, doesn't make any sense. But it makes great sense in the game of chess. You know, if you're looking at all the pieces of chess and somebody points out to you the piece you need to move, that's a great hint. In most games, it isn't a great hint. Even in playing drafts, generally speaking, the piece you want to move is reasonably obvious. But in chess, no, you have obviously a wide range of pieces. And so again, it's chess-like. It's not an earth-shattering reference, but it is in fact quite interesting. And again, it would be very old. The story of Diarmuid and Grania is tied into the whole landscape of Ireland. They actually will tell you where Diarmuid and Grania spent the night in such a part of Ireland, and etc., etc. And I believe they know where that tree is, actually. Believe it or not, it's in the landscape of Ireland. So again, it's another interesting reference, and it's bringing you to more chess-like. So now we come on to the next section. Thank you very much. And now we come to another of the great historic sites of Ireland. And again, this is just an excuse to put up for us, hopefully, some nice videos and visuals from these great historic sites, which are then associated with manuscripts, which then hopefully describe somewhat the game of chess. So obviously, we're here in Cashel. Now, Cashel is the great site of the Ogonacht kings of Munster, and later associated, of course, with McCarthy's and O'Brien's, and is the great sort of cathedral stroke inauguration site of the kings of Munster, whichever that might be. As I say, it's contested, of course. And then, of course, became a site of a great cathedral. As you can see here, it's kind of destroyed. It was attacked during the period of the Confederate Wars in the 1650s. There was a great massacre here, 1640s, 1650s, by Murragh O'Brien, the Baron of Inchiquin. He massacred a whole lot of Catholics in this building. Anyway, the reason why we are here discussing Cashel is because there is a glossary associated with the Bishop of Cashel of approximately 900 AD. It's a very important glossary. Now, a glossary, again, is simply a text that takes an old word, if you like, in Irish and describes that word in more modern Irish than the original word. So it's very useful for scholars, especially of very old Irish. Obviously, it helps them a lot because it describes what these words mean. Now, it so happens that in Cormac's glossary, believe it or not, fidchell is described. Now, this is of enormous importance. We can't underestimate this fact. And it is, in fact, as I said, so the text, unfortunately, is a little ambiguous. So you can't be absolutely clear about what Cormac is saying about fidchell, but you can see the text here. Now I'm going to read it out, but you'll get various translations of this text at various times, etc., etc. So it's not easy to be very exact. It's mostly in Irish, as you can see, but actually there are little bits in English. You can see the Irish script identifies an Irish, and that's not an Irish script is in very easy to see Latin. So this is the description. Fidchell, that is cause sense. That is cause and sense are used in playing it. Now, I just like to describe this for a minute. That's an old etymology of the word fidchell. You'll see this in a lot of different places. Now, to go back to the text again, or sinew and sense, or fua kel, that is shape of a church. That is, the fidchell board is four-sided in the first place, and its rows are straight, and there are black and white in it, and it is a different person who wins every other time. So also the church in all particulars, fed by four gospels in the four quarters of the earth. That is, it is thus in the church, filling the four respective parts of the world with the gospels. It is straight, that is upright, in judgments with the rows of scriptures. That is black and white, that is good and bad, live in the church. Now, there's two important things to take from this text. One is this concept of right and wrong, sort of good versus evil. been associated with the game of fill. That's actually very important because it ties in beautifully with the early references to chess. And hopefully we'll talk about in a minute a very important text from the Book of Lismore that also ties into this. But the second and extremely important concept that seems to come across from this text is the idea that they're playing chess on a checkered board. In other words, it's black and white squares. That now it's not absolutely easy to take that from the Irish, but it does appear to be the only way you can make sense of that passage. That it's telling you that they're playing the game on black and white squares. So again, it's a glossary, a very old glossary of the Irish language, which is telling you that fill is played on a checkered board, on black and white squares. Now that is unbelievably important in the history of board games. You do not get any board game played on a checkered board except chess. Now, people will say you played drafts. Drafts is a different history, and originally it wasn't played on checkerboard. A checkerboard is very associated with the game of chess. So if Cormac is saying that in this text, and it is slightly ambiguous, then we've hit pay dirt. We absolutely proven virtually that fill is chess. Now, however, it is a somewhat disputed passage. Now, I'd like to describe here, if you look at it, you'll see a picture of a dictionary. Now, this dictionary is Dictionary of the Irish Language, grew out of another dictionary called the Contributions Towards the History of the Irish. And then you have this book written about the 1950s, the Dictionary of the Irish Language, and then later it becomes an online thing called DIL. .ie, the Dictionary of the Irish Language online. Now, in this text, the contributions originally and this 1950s dictionary, in this online text, you're talking about the gold standard in our understanding of the Irish language. This is where the great scholars of the Irish language, going all the way back nearly 100 years, gather together and try to figure out the meaning of words. So this is very important what the DIL and what this other dictionary uses to describe fill. Now, if you read down to this text, and I've highlighted in red here, and I'm going to read out, this is what these scholars, their understanding of the word fill, based mostly on that reference from Cormac. And it says there, a game played for a stake with two sets of figures on a square board divided into black and white squares. I'll read that again. Their understanding of fill is a game played for a stake with two sets of figures on a square board divided into black and white squares. Now, without using the word checkered, that's obviously what it means. It's divided into black and white squares. It's a checkered board. So these great scholars of the Irish language are interpreting that text from Cormac's glossary as meaning that that they're playing on a checkered board. Now that's just fantastically important reference. I mean, this is really, you just can't underestimate this. This is effectively telling you that that fill is played on a checkered board. So again, of enormous importance in driving you towards this understanding of fill, that the ancient Irish game is actually modern day style chess because it's played on a checkerboard. Now, we don't have many corroborating references to this. It's really based on Cormac's text, that text that you heard originally from Cormac of Cashel. But there might be just one slight straw in the wind that I've found that possibly corroborates what's stated there, and that is this curious reference from the metrical Din Shankus. Now, the Din Shankus is another of the great texts of Ireland. It's a text that was popularised in the Bardic schools, whereby the original Bardic scholars of Ireland would recite a poem that would give you the history of the various historic sites around Ireland, like Tara and Newgrange and that kind of thing, or decent Nouth, isn't it? Describing the history of these historic sites. So it's a very, very old and extremely important text in the history of Ireland, the Din Shankus. And you get the metrical Din Shankus, and in the metrical Din Shankus you get the Carn Mall poem. Now this poem is kind of describing a hag. It's a sort of a poem that just goes into detail describing how horrible she looked. And in this poem, if you look at it, Mo a chlár fill, Kia the Bias Day, in our Fian chlár fill, a throne father would. So if you look at the second half of that, you'll see her nose projecting far in front of her, longer than a bear ploughshare. So that gives you the idea of this poem. The poem is just describing a hag, and it's really going into great detail how horrible she looked. but in the first two lines, he's referring to her chlorophyll, her row of teeth, her set of teeth, and then it's referring to chlorophyll, obviously a similar sounding word, of course. Chlorophyll meaning the board game of Phil, meaning the chessboard. So you have the set of teeth and the set of the chessboard, and somehow the poet is making a comparison between the two. Now, if you sit back and think about it just for a minute, obviously what's happening is that the poem is comparing the set of teeth, her set of teeth, to the set of Phil, because it's checkered, because it's black and white. And that way she's a hag, because when you look at her showing her teeth, it's all full of gaps, and it's white and black and white and black. See, so if you think about it for a minute, you can see how the poet is criticizing her and describing her terribly by comparing her set of teeth to the set of Phil. And again, you sit back and think about that. That would also mean that the Phil board was checkered. So, I mean, the translator here doesn't pick up on that, but I believe if you look at it carefully, I think you can actually see that the poet there is again saying that the fill board is checkered. It's black and white spots in it. So that again would be, it's a straw in the wind, but I think it actually is a little bit of corroborating reference to this idea that the fill board is a checkered board. And as I say, you just can't underestimate that reference. If it is a checkered board, you're effectively talking about modern style chess, no question about it. So thank you very much. So again, as part of this excuse to provide nice videos of historic sites in Ireland, I thought I'd give you quite a lot about the castle of Lismore. It's a wonderful castle overlooking the Blackwater in Lismore in County Waterford. And it's a magnificent ancient castle in Ireland, and associated with I think it's the Dukes of Chatsworth, or sorry, it's it's the Irish house of the family that also owned Chatsworth House in England, and where this manuscript was physically in Chatsworth House until very recently, that I'm going to describe in a minute. So anyway, it's a beautiful castle overlooking the river there, and it's a magnificent sight. So hopefully you won't be bored just watching a little video of it. I go around the castle there, as you can see. Now, what are we doing here in Lismore, in the beautiful town of Lismore in Waterford? Well, it turns out that approximately 1810-ish, when they were doing some renovations to the in 1814, it said, when they were doing renovations to what you can see there, Lismore Castle, they found an ancient manuscript. Now, this ancient manuscript had been lost, if you like, to scholars from about the 1640s. It was known before that, because when the compiler of the Annals of the Four Masters was passing through, Micheál O'Cleric, he took down one of the saints' lives from this book. But so it was known before that, but anyway, it kind of disappeared until it was discovered. They usually say behind a wall or whatever, when they were doing up the castle in 1814. And it's known as the Book of Lismore. Now, and it's very old and very ancient, but the really interesting aspect of the book, it's sometimes known as the Book of McCarthy, Riabhach, you might say, Riabhach, because it's associated with him who died in 1505, but it includes a lot of stories which are of much earlier date. Now, the really interesting aspect to this story is the fact that it has an ancient story, which is also written in a copy of this manuscript in the Royal Irish Academy. So there is two texts of this, and there's also a paragraph approximately summarizing this story in another manuscript, and that summary is well known, whereas the original full text is not all that well known and was never actually fully translated. So this text is known as Scéal na Samhna. It was never fully translated until Liz Gabay had a go at the text a number of years ago, and she sent me a copy of her translation, because I had printed the Irish text in this book, the Irish Invented Chess, a number of years ago, and she saw that, so she sent me the translation. And anyway, So Scéal na Samhna. Now, the idea behind this story in the in the Irish tradition is, I believe anyway, to explain a certain factor that is very obvious if you're acquainted with the traditions of all Ireland. And the factor is that there seems to be a controversial but some sort of crossover between the pagan world and the Christian world that is not easy to understand. Now, so Scéal na Samhain, Samhain is Halloween. Scéal just means story. So it's the story of Halloween. And Halloween is the event that particularly people would want explained from them, if you like, to understand the comparison between Halloween as a Christian feast day and Halloween as an ancient pagan, particularly Irish feast day. So so as the story relates, you see, Halloween is one of the great moments of pagan Ireland. It's one of the great feast days of pagan Ireland. But later on, it becomes one of the great feast days of Christian world. It's the feast day of All Saints and All Souls. So if you like, the Irish would have liked to understand, well, what do you mean? Surely if it's pagan, that has nothing to do with Christian, and yet you seem to have the same day. Well, this story explains that. It goes into detail and explains that there was a pope in Rome that was kind of scandalized by all of the festivities during this pagan ritual of Samhain. So he decided to bring in the feast days of All Saints and All Souls deliberately to, if you like, Christianize that day, to sort of banish the demons that were created by the old pagan festivities. So this would be of great interest in Ireland because both factors are very strong in Ireland, i.e. the old pagan rituals on the one hand, and of course the Christian festivities of the two important feast days. So this story describes that. It's a very important text, and it's a wonder more people aren't interested in this. So as I say, the text then goes on into detail. It describes the fact that the Pope was deliberately creating the Christian feast days on the day of the pagan ones in order deliberately to sort of exorcise, if you want to put it like that, the demons that the pagans are bringing out. He's sort of attacking them with a Christian feast day. Now, he identifies in this story there are approximately three factors that are, if you like, Christianized in that way. One, as I say, is the date, is the actual the feast day of Samhain. He's deliberately creating the Christian feast day to banish the pagan one. Okay, the second one is the is the site known as the Pantheon in Rome. So the Pantheon in Rome, it's a very well-known phenomenon that the Pantheon in Rome was an old pagan pagan sacrifice site, or whatever way you want to look at it, and now it is a Christian church. And how did it go from one to the other? Again, it was deliberately done so by the Pope in order to, if you like, to banish the pagan practices in that church. So he made a Christian church out of the old pagan site. But the critical element here, and which is of great interest in our story, is, believe it or not, he seems to identify the game of fill in that context. He says that the game of fill is a kind of a pagan game that they were used to playing on Samhain, and he kind of Christianized the game. So this is of great interest. And so it goes into detail on this game of fill. Now, it's very hard to follow exactly, even with Liz Gabet's translation, it's very hard to grasp exactly what's going on. But a few things do come across. Now, one is that the use of the word fill in the old Irish stories is in reference also to an international game. What I mean by that is that they're saying in the old story that the people of Rome are playing the game of fill. Now, obviously, that means that the Irish scholars are of the view that fill is a name that can be applied to an international game. And that's an important reference, because people say, oh, well, when the Irish scholars are referring to fill, obviously they're only referring to the native Irish game. No, they're referring to a game that had gone all around the world, as you can see from the fact that they're saying that they're playing fill in Rome. But the second thing that comes across strongly from the game of fill, as described in this Scéal na Samhain story, is that it seems to have multiple pieces with multiple powers. In other words, one side of the game of fill is throwing out a piece that seems to have, as I say, different powers than to another piece. Now, this is an important point, because in the game of chess, obviously you have kings, you have have pawns, but then you have rooks and knights and bishops, different pieces with different powers. Now that makes chess somewhat different to many other games. Obviously, you have drafts, for example. You have the pieces, the men, and then you have kings, but that's it. There's no other pieces. But when you read the text of Sciil na Samhna, it does appear to suggest that you have multiple pieces, multiple powers. That's a very interesting reference. And also, we seem to have the names of these different pieces of different powers. One would be dragons, and the other would be lions, and a few other references. But that might be very important to carry forward when we talk about the Táin Bó Cúailnge in a minute. So you have one concept is three concepts. One, it's an international game, at least in part, fidchell, according to the Old Irish. Two, you have these multiple pieces and multiple powers, and we have names for some of them. And the third concept to come across is this idea that chess is a Christianized game. That was originally a pagan game, and now it's Christianized. Now, if people pause to think about it for a minute, that would have to be true of chess, because obviously you've got the bishop in the game. So what I'm saying, and a lot of other people are saying, is that chess has a pagan origin. I mean, even if you think it comes from India and Persia, whatever, it obviously has an older origin than Christianity, and yet it comes up with a bishop as one of its pieces. So presumably, at some point in time, it went from being a pagan game to it had become Christianized, if you like, and became an allegory of good versus evil. That is a concept we've already seen in the Irish text in Cormac's glossary with respect to fidchell. That's what we see now in Sciil na Samhna, as I described. And if you look at this bit of a video here from a well-known history of chess, you can see that the early references to chess in European literature very much bring in this concept that it's good versus evil. So again, that pushes you, again, that little bit towards the idea that fidchell actually is modern-style chess. So, many thanks. Okay, so we're at the same racket again. We're just using this story as an excuse to put up some nice visuals and videos from some of the great historic sites of Ireland. And in this case, what we're doing is describing what's on this mural that you've just seen. We're talking about the Táin Bó Cúailnge. The Táin Bó Cúailnge is certainly the greatest, certainly usually seen as the oldest and the most important of the great stories of Ireland. And its dating, of course, is a vexed subject, but it would traditionally be dated approximately biblical times in Ireland. That is much disputed in modern times, but I don't agree with any idea that it is from the 11th or 10th centuries. It's clearly far older than that. And I would definitely say before 500 AD. Now, there's also different parts to the Táin, and some of the parts, like the poetry in the Ruscada, have very old Irish and are clearly much older than other parts. So it's a very complicated story. There's also different versions of the Táin. And so, yes, you can argue the toss about some of these things, but clearly this is a massively old story. It is very, very, very old. And, certainly the oldest anything we have in Ireland in terms of history, really. Now, the story starts with a place that you've seen already on these pictures, a place called Rathcrohan, which was the seat of Queen Maeve. The story, obviously, is Queen Maeve in Connacht is disputing the ownership of a bull and disputing the powers of bulls between her and a person living in the Cooley Peninsula in North County Louth. And it becomes a kind of a fight between the Connacht people and the Ulster people and all the rest of it. Hopefully it's a well-known story. Anyway, she is beginning the Táin in the Rathcrohan in Roscommon, and just down the road from Rathcrohan, and you'll see the few signs there, you have Tulsk. And you'll see a video from Tulsk because they've actually put a kind of a visitor centre on the story of the Táin. And then you go from there. And I mean, it goes all across Ireland. You could see the map there. But another key place in the story of the Táin. Well, it's not a key place, but I just thought I'd describe here Cross a Keel. I'm describing Cross a Keel because I'm just giving it as an example of how you identify the place names. You see, one of the great things about the Táin is it's tied into Irish place names, and Irish place names are incredibly old, and that tells you that the Táin is very old, and also presumably some aspect of the Táin has to be true as well, because otherwise how does it tie in so much to Irish place names? So I'm just giving an example of a place name there. You saw Crossakeel. Crossakeel in turn you can see on the manuscript where it says dot I dot Crossakeel. Dot I dot is the Old Irish manuscript version of uh, id est, meaning that is. So that is Crossakeel. It's describing Crossakeel in the Old Manuscript. In other words, it's telling you how we can identify on the ground the place names from the manuscripts, and therefore how old it is. Anyway, you go on from Crossakeel, and another place you could talk about is Ardee, and in County Louth. And again, the actual place name of Ardee is Baile Átha Ferdia. It's the town of the ford of Ferdia. Ferdia was the great champion fighting on behalf of the Connacht army against the Ulster army, and Cuchulainn was fighting in the Ulster army, and Cuchulainn defeated Ferdia here at Ardee, at the place that you'll see described there, that water tract. It'll be the original site of the battle between Cuchulainn and Ferdia is supposed to be a little bit to the left as you're looking at this water course. Anyway, so I'm just describing these great historic sites around Ireland associated with the Táin, and it ends up with the bull in Cooley. They actually have put this monument to a bull in the Cooley Peninsula. So, so that's the Táin. Anyway, again, hopefully it's reasonably well known. Now, why are we describing the Táin? Because in some of the oldest parts of the Táin, that is very old Irish, they describe a game of fidchell. They're playing this board game that we're trying to identify whether it's modern day chess or not. And the amazing thing is that they seem, now again, the part of the Táin that this is in is part of the Ruscada, and this is not often translated. It's not always translated with the main text of the Táin because it's so old Irish and people are just not sure what it meant. So you will find some relatively modern translations of this part of the Ruscada. I chased up approximately 3 different translations of this text, and they're all very different to each other. So I don't want you'd come away with the idea that it's all, done and dusted exactly how this text can be translated. But this is the text as they're playing a game of fidchell. Now, if you look at it carefully, it seems to use the same words as has just been used in the book of Lismore, in the Scéal na Samhna text. So it appears to be the same multiple pieces as is used in the Scéal na Samhna text with respect to fidchell. Now, I think that's very, very interesting. I think that seems to give us the names of some of the other pieces in the game of fidchell. Obviously, in the game of fidchell, you've got the men, the fur, you've got the kings, but it does appear that there are also multiple pieces, and it does appear that the Táin text agrees with the Scéal na Samhna text in the names of some of these multiple pieces. Again, it is ambiguous. I can't tell you definitively that's the translation of it, but looking at it, I think we're hitting a great coincidence, if you like, in these words. And that's why the Táin text is very important. But there's another reference that I just wanted to highlight in this Táin text. And again, we don't really have a definitive translation. So I'll give you a translation there, but it's not definitive what exactly has been said here. But in the Irish, you have a word there called fair sanis, S-A-N-A-I-S, fair. Fair, F-E-R, is a well-known word in Irish meaning man. So it's man sanis. Now, what's sanis? Well, I'm giving you here sanis even in a modern day dictionary. This is Niall O'Donnell's dictionary, Irish English dictionary. And even in that, you can see you're getting the concept of sanis, a kind of and it'd be fair sanis, so it'd be an advising man, a counselling man, a sort of a man whispering in the ear, if you like, of the main king. And that's the concept you get from fair sanis. Now, the very interesting thing, if you look at these references, again, from Murray's History of Chess, which is a very well-known compilation on the history of chess, and you hit it with this word, fair sanis, you'll notice the word furzan. And and as you can see from the long list that you get there, it's mostly associated with the queen in chess. And if you look at some of the meanings there of that fair sanis in the Persian understanding of the game, you seem to have the same meaning, actually. Furazan, a kind of an advising man, a kind of a counselling man to the king. And so I think there's a great coincidence between that, because Ferasanis and Furazan would be pronounced very similarly. So I think you could make the case there that that's actually what's happening in the Irish text. Again, we don't really have a definitive translation of the Irish text, but we know that Furazan is said in the context of the game of Fidchell. And it's not a huge long text that I'm pulling out the Furazan out of. It's only a few lines describing Fidchell, and you have Ferasanis. So I think that's coincidence. So we have then, from the Taun text, to summarise, we seem to have a corroboration of this idea of multiple pieces of multiple powers, and the same words being used in Sciail na Samhna. And second of all, we throw in this idea of the Ferasanis as actually being the same as Furazan in the international understanding of the words of chess. So that's I think of some significance. So that's the takeaway from the Taun text on the on Fidchell. So we'll come to the next section now. Okay, so now on our traditional model of just using this as an excuse to put up some nice pictures and videos from some of the great historic sites of Ireland, we're here at Clonard in County Meath. Clonard is the great site, of course, of St. Finian's famous university. It's often described as university's famous monastery, and in or about the 6th century, as long ago as that. And St. Finian has become a great name in all across the Diocese of Meath because of the fame of this monastery. And you can see there some of the saints that are said to have been educated in St. Finian's Monastery at Clonard. So at first you'll see here the modern day Catholic Church of Clonard, which has the only real relic we've left. The reality is the great old Irish monastery of Clonard and the later Norman additions to that monastery are all destroyed, pretty much. There's nothing there. There's hardly anything there. It's a green field. We'll go into looking some of what does remain, but generally speaking, nothing is there except for a baptismal font. So I hope I'll be forgiven for showing you a video in some detail of this baptismal font, because it's the only thing we have of the great monastery of Clonard. I don't know what date you can put for that font, but it's extremely interesting, and it's very nice. It's quite well preserved, and so you can see it there. I put two videos together because I thought it would be really interesting just to look at that in some detail. But anyway, whatever on the ground is left of the great monastery of Clonard, you'll see, according to the map, you'll see there is beside the Church of Ireland Church of Clonard, and you'll see a video now of myself walking over to the Anglican Church and squeezing between the gate there. And you can see there the Anglican Church of Clonard, and one of the relics they do talk about is this kind of font that is at ground level. That's supposed to be another great relic of the great monastery of Clonard. Now, we're talking here about chess, so you might ask the question, well, why do we have to go to Clonard in County Meath? And this is because there seems to be some strange reference, strange connection between Clonard and the Lewis chess pieces. Now, for those who don't know, the Lewis chess pieces are very, very, very famous in the history of chess in Western Europe. They are certainly, I think, the oldest sort of complete chess set ever discovered, complete modern style chess set ever discovered. And they were reputed to be discovered on the Isle of Lewis off the coast of Scotland in the early 19th century. But the reality is that story of, and you can see the chess pieces there, that story of it being discovered in Lewis is actually very much contested. And you can see there an article by Ken Wilde. He's the joint author of the Oxford Companion to Chess, and he's writing there in the British Chess magazine. So it's an important article, and he just says, look, this is all up in the air. Nobody really knows where they were found. It seems to be a bit of a fairy tale to say they were found in Lewis. So what is the story of the Lewis chess piece? Well, the story of the Lewis chess piece comes into the story of Walter Scott. It seems to be that Walter Scott is the main figure in selling the chess pieces, I think, to the British Museum particularly. And you'll see there Walter Scott. Walter Scott, of course, is a very well-known Scottish writer. of Ivanhoe and all these other great novels. He's also a leading Freemason in Scotland. But in fact, as you can see in this book by W.J. Fitzpatrick, some people have had their doubts about Walter Scott and whether he actually wrote all the novels attributed to him, whether he was a bit of a crook. Anyway, Walter Scott had come to Ireland, as you can see in this newspaper article, and while there he had met with a guy called Tuke, Tuke, Dr. Tuke, and he had who had a museum in Stephen's Green in Dublin. Now it turns out that Tuke in this museum had a chess piece, had a chess queen, and it was claimed that that chess queen was found at Clonard, which is why we're talking about Clonard. Now, the interesting thing about this chess queen that Dr. Tuke had in his possession, it went from Dr. Tuke eventually into the Royal Irish Academy, from the Royal Irish Academy into the National Museum of Ireland. But now let's look at an illustration of the Clonard chess queen. That's done by, or at least is in the book by John O'Donovan, a very well-known, very, very important Irish scholar of the mid 19th century. Now, and let's look at the O'Donovan's illustration of the Tuke chess queen found at Clonard, superimposed onto a picture of the Lewis chess pieces. Obviously, the Lewis chess pieces are at the back in this picture in colour, and the Clonard piece is the illustration, and it's superimposed on that from the illustration. Now, I put it to you straight away. That Clonard chess queen is of the same hoard as the Lewis chess pieces. Just look at the illustrations of it. The comparison is way too coincidental. So now what are we saying? We're saying that the great discovery of the oldest chess, proper modern style chess board ever found in Western Europe, the Lewis chess pieces, actually seemed to come from Clonard, because the whole Lewis story was always a very strange and very loose one, and yet we have what seems to have come from the same hoard. We have, I think, definitively coming from Clonard in County Meath that you've just seen all the description of. So what's going on here? So I think, looking at it seems to me pretty clear that Walter Scott purchased those pieces from Tuke of the Stephen's Green in Dublin, and then passed them off as Scottish to sell them later on to the libraries in Scotland and in London. So it appears to me, anyway, that in fact the Lewis chess pieces come out of Ireland. Now that is obviously of great interest, because the Lewis chess pieces are modern style chess. They have, you can see the whole pawns lined up. You can see the multiple pieces, multiple powers, kings, queens, whatever. It is a modern style chess set, and it seems to have been found in Ireland. So that's the takeaway. So you have a very old chess set that actually seems to have been found in Ireland. And the second important takeaway is that somebody somewhere seems determined not to find these chess references in Ireland, that they seem determined to claim them from Scotland and the UK, whatever, because they must know that there's so many references to Phil back in the ancient Irish stories, and somebody somewhere just doesn't want to admit that in fact it seems to be that the Irish have something to do with the history of chess. It could be kind of a colonial thing whereby they try to suppress Irish nationalism. I know that's a bit of a leap, but not too much so. So in conclusion, I just want to raise a few more specific points. Now, you're looking there at the portrait of John O'Donovan. John O'Donovan is absolutely a really big name in Irish language studies and Irish history for the mid-19th century, but actually of all time. He became attached, for example, to the Irish Ordnance Survey, and he therefore compiled letters which detail the local history of Ireland for the entire island. An amazing series of letters, very, very important. And then he translated the Annals of the Four Masters, which is a pivotal moment in the history of Irish language studies. So John O'Donovan, really, really, really big guy in the whole history, in Irish history and Irish language studies in particular. Now, as you can see here from his translation of the Book of Rights, he had no doubt whatsoever, but that the game that was played among the ancient Irish was chess, and as I say, it's from him you get this illustration of the Clonard chess piece. He puts that into his book on the Book of Rights. Now, I'd just like to talk about the Book of Rights just for a minute. What's happening in the Book of Rights is where the lower down sort of kings of Ireland have to give a kind of a symbolic tribute to the main king of Ireland, and that's what the Book of Rights are. It's kind of these ancient sort of taxes or nominal tributes that the lower down kings are giving to the high king, and they are traditional for particular areas of Ireland. So you get parts of Ireland where you have maybe the salmon from the Boyne and they have to give that, or where you get horses, and so you have to give horses and hounds and this sort of thing. And among that you have you have these chess boards. Fiddle boards are given as part of the Book of Rights. That's obviously why John O'Donovan is including this bit about chess, because it's an intriguing fact. But one of the interesting points about this is that the Book of Rights usually lists multiple boards that have to be given in tribute, not just one. You would give 10 boards, I think 20 boards, and then 2 boards and 3 boards, as you can see here, as part of this sort of tax, this sort of tribute. Now, let's go back for a minute to describe the Lewis chess pieces. The Lewis chess pieces are rather peculiar in that in the one hoard and the same design and the same origin, they have three boards together. It's about whatever it is, nearly 100 pieces. So there are actually 3 boards within the Lewis chess boards. Now that of itself is slightly curious and remarkable. And now, but if you were to link that back to the Book of Rights, that might give you an explanation as to why you have 3 boards together, because that's what's listed in the Book of Rights. So obviously you can see a potential explanation as to why you have 3 boards together in the Lewis set, coming from the Book of Rights, linking the 2 together again. But the other point about the Book of Rights is that these are sort of clearly ancient, symbolic kind of tributes that the lower kings are giving to the higher kings in Ireland. Now, I respectfully submit, I mean, this is just an assumption. You can't prove it definitively. But if Phil had come into Ireland from, say, the Vikings, which might have been in Ireland at this time, this is pre-Norman in all probability, but might be after the Vikings came, I don't believe that they would have, among these ancient rites, the requirement to send up to the High King 3 of these Viking-type games, because it wouldn't be traditional to Ireland. It'd be very out of place, I believe, when you look at these references. So that's the other point that comes across in the Book of Rights. Somehow, the Fiddle game evokes some kind of tradition and some kind of ancient lore out of Ireland. So in my opinion, and we might park that and think about that for a minute in terms of then trying to figure out the origins of Fiddle in Ireland. And I think we can link that back to a reference again from Thomas Hyde. So to clarify, you came across him again. Thomas Hyde is the English author of about 3 important works on Latin. From the in Latin on the history of chess from the late 17th century, from the Bodleian Library in Oxford. Now if you'd like to just read here a description that he gives in his text. He says here that the old Irish were so greatly addicted to chess that amongst them the possession of good estates had been decided by it, and there are some estates at this very time the property whereof doth still depend upon the issue of a game of chess. For example, the heirs of 2 certain noble families, Irish noble families, who he could name, to say nothing of others, hold their lands upon this tenure, viz. That one of them should account the other at chess, in this manner, that whichever of them should conquer should seize and possess the estate of the other. Therefore, I have been told, they manage the affair prudently among themselves. Once a year they meet by appointment to play at chess. One of them makes a move, and the other says, I will consider how to answer you next year. This being done, a public notary commits to writing the situation of the game, by which method a game which neither hath won hath been and will be continued for some hundreds of years. Now, obviously, in that, you were saying that chess must be a very ancient, important game to the Irish. Now Hyde is an English writer, okay, he's writing in Latin, but he does say in this text some of his sources from Ireland. He mentions a bishop in Ireland called Narcissus Marsh, but also he refers to Chulanga O'Muel Connery. O'Muel Connery is one of the great bardic families of Ireland, meaning the great historian, the ancient Irish historian families of Ireland. There's a number of them out there. You could talk about the McFurbishes, you could talk about the O'Clery's, and the O'Muel Connery. So these are the great families if you're trying to find what would be the authentic history of Ireland going way, way back. And he apparently was talking to one of them, Chulanga O'Muel Connery, sometimes known as Tully Connery in English. And actually, if you look at some of the catalogues of the manuscripts in the Bodleian Library when Hyde was in charge of it, they refer to references from this to Tully Connery. So he's one of the great historians, and he obviously fed into Thomas Hyde's knowledge of chess in Ireland. So therefore, this reference to the antiquity of chess in Ireland is very, very interesting and shows that it's some sort of ancient game in Ireland. Now, I wish to point out to you another reference from Thomas Hyde. You can see it here in the Latin. And just look particularly at the lower part highlighted in red there. It says Nam far bran est vir scacari ut Anglicae dicimus chessman. That means so far bran is vir scacari, as in English we say chessman. That's just the translation from the Latin. So you can see from there explicitly, absolutely and completely, he's saying that the brannamh of Ireland is chess. So just in case people are disputing that, okay, mid 17th century, this English writer in Latin is absolutely saying that the brannamh anyway is is chess. Now I'd like to just describe that text above it there in. Also highlighted in red. Now, this text is different. I translated this from the Latin, and I think it's quite a good translation from the Latin, but the Latin itself is ambiguous. But I'll read it out anyway. So it says, from this reckoning, however, the Irish are the exception, who not from others did they receive in return, but from the birth of this game itself, as it is seen by them. The name having been selected while inventing and adapting for themselves, they applied that name for this game into their usage. The birth, or the ingenuity and nature of chess having been considered, which it is plain may be difficult and sometimes torments the mind, from that joined together with it they imposed the name which in their letters is called brandub. Now again, that's very ambiguous. It's hard to know what he's saying, but what comes across loud and clear is that his Irish sources are telling him in the mid-17th century that they claim to have invented chess. When you read it carefully, who not from others did they, the Irish, receive in return, but from the birth of this game itself, as it is seen by them. So definitely the Irish sources are telling him that they have that it's from them that the chess comes from. So it's a very interesting reference, and I'm just throwing it out there so that there is a deep antiquity for this game in Ireland, and the Irish always claimed that they invented it. So I just wanted to point that out. Now, there's just one other point in conclusion that I wanted to bring out, and that is that when you look at the references to these games in the ancient records of Ireland, it's in the context of the heroic tales of Ireland, the tales about the Fianna. You heard about the Fianna, for example, in Diarmid August Grania, and then obviously you have the great battles between Ferdy and Cuchulainn at Ardee, and which they referred to in the reference to Fidchell in the Táin Cuillagna. So what I'm trying to bring out to you is that this game is in the Irish heroic context. In other words, it's frankly a heroic game. If you were to put into that context Tiddlywinks or any game that was based on chance or was a silly little game, it just doesn't fit. Chess seems, or the game that the Gaelic Irish are playing at this time, seems to evoke awe. In other words, you're a great champion. You're one of the great heroes of Ireland. And you can play hurling and send a slither through the mouth of a hound like Cuchulainn, and you can win at fill. You can, so in other words, to win at fill is also an heroic act. If you pause to consider it for a minute, it's something awesome. So what is that then? What game evokes awe if you're to be a good player at it? Very few games internationally, and one of the few games would be chess. So I just like to leave you with that concept and these other concepts here in conclusion. And you can see there again this book, if you want to get it, you can see the link there to lulu.com. And many thanks for paying heed to this long video.